Lule, here represented by Ambassador Semakula Chiwanuka, Ms. Lona Lule, among others. The members of university management who are here, the chairperson of Makerere University Enrollment Fund, Professor Maggie Chigozi, the representative of the family of Mary Stewart. Charles Stewart has already been introduced, but he didn't stand. I think you stand so that people can see you better. All members of staff who are with us, the student community, the distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I've already been introduced. My name is Henry Arini Itwe, and I'm standing in for the Vice Chancellor, who should have been here, but he's currently away in South Africa on official duties of the university. So you will allow me to therefore read his speech verbatim. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to this celebration of the life of an icon of Makerere University, His Excellency Yusuf Lule, particularly at a time when we are commemorating a century of existence. This is indeed a historic day, as it demonstrates Makerere's readiness and willingness to accord the honor that is due to all those gallant men and women who made significant contributions to the institution that we are proud of, and we call it our alma mater. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm glad to inform you that the proposal to name the Central Teaching Facility 2 the Yusuf Lule Central Teaching Facility was well received by management, and upon conclusion it was recommended to the University Council, which indeed approved the proposed name. The proposal was discussed by Council at its 156th meeting held on 8th of June 2022, and on 20th of June 2022, a press release was issued announcing the official decision by Makerere University to rename the Central Teaching Facility to the Yusuf Lule Central Teaching Facility. The naming of buildings and roads is one of the key activities outlined in our conceptual framework for the Makerere at 100 celebrations. Therein, we note that it is important to recognize the contributions of various individuals and entities that contributed to the establishment of a strong foundation upon which successful generations have gone on to build for the future, as our motto clearly states. We are gathered here today to immortalize the life of and the contribution of His Excellency Yusuf Lule to his alma mater, Makerere University. At one such facility constructed by the government of Uganda with financial assistance from the African Development Bank. Ladies and gentlemen, I believe the citation and speech from the family will delve into detailed accounts of his life and the contribution of His Excellency Yusuf Lule to his alma mater and country. Nonetheless, permit me to share a few highlights. His Excellency Yusuf Lule's appointment as the first Ugandan principal of Makerere University came at a time when the East African nations, that is Uganda, Kenya, and Tanzania, had successfully secured independence. According to an account by Professor Asavia Wandera, a two-time Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, and I quote, Sir Bernard de Bansen, who had successfully steered Makerere through the period of special relationship with the University of London, was appointed the first Vice Chancellor of the University of East Africa, a seasoned Ugandan, Mr. Yusuf Lule, who had lectured at the Faculty of Education, served as Minister of Social Development in the pre-independence times and was then serving as the chairperson of both the Public Service Commission and Makerere University, was persuaded to accept the post of principal, Makerere University College. End of quote. Thanks to inter-university collaboration and exchanges between Makerere, Nairobi, and Dar es Salaam under the University of East Africa. And he succeeded in building academic standards and innovations during His Excellency Yusuf Lule's term as principal of the University of East Africa. An example of his progress was cited in 1971 in an article, in a journal article, by yet another Garant alumnus and two-time Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, Professor William Senteza Kajubi. And again, I quote, the accomplishments of East African countries in the field of education since independence have been remarkable. The number of children who leave school, have completed a full primary course, have more than, the numbers are more than tripled, and secondary school enrollment has more than doubled in the last 5 years. Everywhere in these countries, one cannot fail to be struck by visible signs of expansion and improvement of educational facilities, end of quote. So there was a great expansion during that time. Ladies and gentlemen, our gathering here today is testimony that we appreciate His Excellency Yusuf Lule's contribution to legacy and stature of Makerere University as an institution that is desirous of leveraging 100 years of excellence in building a transformed society. We therefore sincerely thank the family of His Excellency Yusuf Lule for accepting to partner with Makerere University to make this event a success. It is my sincere hope and prayer that the students, alumni, visitors, and all stakeholders who walk past this building and see the name Yusuf Lule prominently etched on its walls will each be inspired to make a meaningful contribution to this institution, the nation, and indeed the world. Thank you for listening to me as we build for the future. I thank you.
Thank you so much, the Acting Vice Chancellor of Makerere University. Now, who are we celebrating? Because now that it's official, this is Yusuf Lule teaching facility. Who is he? Yusuf Lule, born on 10th April 1912 and lived up to the 21 January 1985, was a Ugandan professor and civil servant who served as the first president of Uganda between 13th April and 20th June 1979. So the one we are celebrating today is His Excellency. He's been a president of the Republic of Uganda. He was educated at King's College, Budo from 1929 to 1934, Makerere University College, Kampala, 1934 to 1936, and Fort Harare University at Alice, South Africa, 1936 to 39, and the University of Edinburgh. In 1947, Professor Lule married Hannah Wamala at King's College, Budo Church, where he was a teacher and she was a head girl. In 1959, Democratic Party, DP, nominated Professor Lule as a candidate to become Katikiro, or Prime Minister of the sub-national kingdom of Uganda. Many aristocratic figures in the kingdom distrusted Lule because of his Muslim origins, and Michael Chintu ultimately won the election. Upon Uganda's independence in 1962, he became chairman of the Public Service Commission. So this is the type of person we are celebrating. Y.K. Lule served as the first black principal of Makerere University College from 1964 to 1970. While he was principal, he had been at the center of controversy over the role of the university, the pace of Africanization in Makerere, and the freedom and independence of the university in academic matters. I think Professor Chiwanuka can witness this because it's the university where such ideas are harbored. Paradoxically, the departure of the University of East Africa in 1970 led to the departure of Principal Y.K. Lule. On the last day of the University of East Africa, the visitor to Makerere University College announced that according to the new Makerere University Act, the post of principal had disappeared, and therefore Y.K. Lule would be assigned other duties in the nation. The Vice Chancellor of Makerere University was then to be Frank Kalimozo, and Permanent Secretary, Office of the President, Head of the Civil Service, and Secretary to the Cabinet. Y.K. Lule was also the Assistant Secretary General of the Association of African Universities in Accra, Ghana, between 1973 and 1978. Professor Lule served as a minister in the pre-independence British colonial government and later as an Assistant Secretary General of the Commonwealth Secretariat. He went into exile after Idi Amin came to power. On the 24th of March 1979, during the Moshi Conference, the Uganda National Liberation Front was formed and an election for chairman was held. And here, Professor Yusuf Lule emerged chairman against his opponent, Mr. Paulo Mwanga, who became head of the Military Affairs Commission then. Later, like caught up and prepared by the fall of Kampala, Lule hurriedly compiled a list of ministers meant to represent the ethnic balances of Uganda's population. On 12th April 1979, Lule and his cabinet boarded a flight from Dar es Salaam to Entebbe to fly in for his inauguration as the President of the Republic of Uganda. While the plane was stopped in Mwanza, Tanzania, officials decided to delay it there until they could ensure better security for a ceremony in Kampala. The next day, Professor Lule and his ministers reached Entebbe and were brought into Kampala in a TPDF motorcade in the late afternoon. Professor Lule was then sworn in as the President of the Republic of Uganda in front of the parliamentary building and gave a brief speech pledging to bring a return of law and order to Uganda. Lule concluded by saying in Luganda, "Now it is our turn." Upon swearing in as the President of the Republic of Uganda, Professor Y.K. Lule became the visitor of Makerere University. And first students of Makerere University took to the streets of Kampala and surrounded the now mansion, chanting, "Ffe twagala Lule, oba tufa tufe." That is Professor Yusuf Lule, Chironde Lule, the man we are celebrating today. Now, I take this single honor to invite Miss Nora Lule, the daughter of this prominent professor, to come and give us a brief citation on His Excellency Yusuf Chironde Lule. Nora, the platform is yours.
Ambassador, Your Royal Highnesses, ministers, educators, and friends, thank you for joining us today. I'd like to thank Makerere University for bestowing this honor upon our father. It's a very great honor. It was rather unexpected, but here we are to celebrate. I'm not going to talk about my career, my father's career from an educational perspective or a career perspective. I'm going to give a personal touch, talking from my view as a daughter. My father was very passionate about education, and I'll tell you or share with you my view in my early years. As a lot of people would expect, if a person is a professor, people assume that when somebody is an educator, that their children automatically take to education. In my early years, frankly, I can tell you that I was resistant to education. I didn't like school. Very early on in my years, I would conjure ways of delaying my exit to go to school, make sure my uniform is ruffled, my shoe has an issue, I'm not well. But my father would, you know, he started taking out a thermometer, checking me out, taking me to the doctor. He suddenly realized there was a pattern. Then I had to change my pattern. Rather than being ill first thing in the morning, I started being unpredictable, being ill the day before. And then that ran out of steam. And then I had my partner in crime, who was our neighbor next door, and he said, no, we have to mix it up a little bit. Put a bit of flour on your face to make yourself look pale. That worked for a few days, and we ran out of ideas, and then he came up with another idea. Put some signal underneath your tongue, so when your father puts the thermometer in, it may throw the thermometer off and you'd appear to be unwell. So my father seemed to see, he just realized there was a bit of a pattern. So he countered. The next time I was unwell, he took us to our family doctor, who was Dr. Patel, and said, Dr. Patel, this child, every time she comes in, make sure that her medicine is in the form of an injection. My father at the time thought this was a deterrent, and I thought, wow. But actually, the desire to go to school was even less than the fear of the injection. So I said, okay, I'll have to ride this one out. So I started facing injections. And then my father said, okay, this doesn't work. So he took me for a walk around in the grounds, and he said, okay, let me share with you how I started my life in education. He said, okay, I came from a background where we didn't have transport and we had to walk several miles to get to school. You've got the advantage of being driven by a car. Actually, I said to my father, well, that's a brilliant idea. If I have to walk to get to school, that will even take me longer. That's what I thought. And he thought, oh, this is not working. So he briefly handed over the responsibility to our late sister, Frida Blick, to take over the responsibility of getting me to school in the morning, because they thought that, you know, she'd learn to be responsible and to show that she's a responsible citizen, because they had given up. I ended up having a very strong bond with my sister, but still the desire to go to school wasn't there. I just wasn't motivated. My father, and he knew that I spent a lot of time watching science fiction on television. And he said, well, do you know, you could even get into a spacecraft and go into the spacecraft that they use in Star Trek. And I thought, oh, that's a brilliant idea. What do I need to do? He says, you have to go to school. So I went to school for a few days, and I realized that the curriculum has nothing to do with a spacecraft. So I wasn't motivated again. It was a cycle that kept going on until my father said, that's it, we have to send you to boarding school. So I was sent to a boarding school that quite frankly, it was more like a prison. My father thought I had settled in, hadn't heard from me. The next thing he knew is my first letter said, actually, I'll tell you about the food. Today, I looked at my vegetables and I saw something moving it when in the food when it was being served. I think it was worms or something, and I thought he'd have a lot of concern. His reply back was to say that actually that's protein, very good for you. Then I upped the ante a bit. My next answer was, well, that's not, you see, that is the issue. Because these things are moving, so they are able to move off my plate. I ended up not having a balanced diet because I don't have enough protein. So where do we go from there? I need to come home. You know, this is not going to work for me. So my father came to the school, saw the headmistress, and I thought, oh, I'm going to get a reprieve. No, actually, the conversation was around she needs to do long distance running. She needs to go in for cross-country running. She needs to go in for athletics. He put me in all these hard physical activities, everything to keep me occupied so that I don't have time to think about where I am. A few months later, looking at my school reports, actually my grades weren't improving, so they thought, oh, what's happening? Came back to the school. I had fallen in with a crowd that actually suffered with the same affliction. So I had friends, you know, all birds of the same feathers flock together, don't they? So we were having a jolly time, bad grades, not motivated, whatever. Then my father had another talk with me, and he said, actually, you can be anything you like. I don't care about the grades anymore. Just, you know, you can be anything that you like in school. And I said, what? You mean later on in life I can become anything that I want? And he said, yes, I'm not making you anything. You just decide what you want. You just choose what you want. From that point onwards, my grades turned around. The issue was always people deciding for me what to do. From the moment that I realized that I had options and I could go out there and choose what I wanted to do, I suddenly felt motivated. It took years, but my father was relentless. He didn't want me to fall behind and to straddle. That's one way that he actually put a lot of effort in to make sure that I didn't fall behind. And a lot of people will probably think, oh, she's a bit of a spoilt brat. Why didn't he give her a whipping? But my father was an educational psychologist, and he knew very early on in the game that a whipping wasn't going to work for me. It may work for other people, it wasn't going to work for me. He had to persuade me, convince me, sell the idea to me. So anybody that assumes that an educator's child is automatically groomed towards education, that's a false notion. Anyway, that's one aspect of my father. The other thing that I think was particularly interesting, that actually you reflect on life later on, you think backwards, and you think, when you were growing up, your father does certain things, but one thing that I felt really great about with my father is that he was very fascinated by people from different cultures, races, ethnic backgrounds. He had friends from all these ethnic backgrounds. He loved languages. He tried to encourage us to speak other languages and get involved with other cultures, which effectively meant that as we grew up, we had sort of an unparalleled view of the world, and we could mix very well with people. And actually, when you reflect on it today, it's a very useful trait when you're socializing with people, because if you don't have an issue about where they come from, then you know, it's easier to socialize and to blend within society. I don't really want to go into long speech. I was just giving you a brief insight as to the fact that my father was very passionate around education and was prepared to put a lot of effort into it. I personalized it so that you could get an insight as to what it was like. One thing that I would like to do is give a little bit of recognition. A lot of guests have been introduced here, but apart from immediate family, we've got extended family. And my father came from a really big family. But we'd like to recognize our lost uncles and aunties that are not able to celebrate here. So we've got cousins from different branches of the family. And I'd like just to call them out so that they can stand up and be